Hello, my name is Lynette Jalivay, and I'm here interviewing Mr. Wayne Eldridge. And today's date is October 19th, 2020, and we're at the Sparta Public Library in Sparta, Illinois. Wayne, can I call you Wayne?
Yes, you may.
Okay, Wayne, where were you when you were born?
I was born in Murfreesboro, Illinois at St. Joseph's Hospital.
Okay. Who were or are your parents, and what were their occupations?
Okay, my father was Wayne Eldridge. He was originally from Cutler, and we lived in Willisville almost all of my life. And he worked at Menard Penitentiary for 30 years as a guard and retired as a sergeant. My mom's maiden name was Shaunaberg. She grew up in Willisville and lived to be 84, and when we lived in the house across the street from where she was born, and she was out of Willisville probably 2 years in her whole life. You know?
Wow.
So, yeah.
Okay, good. Who were or are your siblings, and what are their names, their genders, and if any of them served in the military?
Okay. My oldest son, David, who is 47.
These are your siblings.
Yeah. Oh, my siblings.
Your siblings, right?
I'm sorry. I was
That's
thinking
okay.
my children.
That's okay.
I have a brother, Robert, who lives in Willisville, and he did not serve.
You've just one brother?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you can go ahead and tell me about your siblings.
Oh, okay.
I mean about your children. I'm sorry.
My oldest son, David, is 47. He is a law school graduate from Tulane, has his own private firm in Springfield. He's a lobbyist, and he served after 9/11. He served 8 years in the Naval Reserve as he, I think, got out as a first lieutenant, or a lieutenant, a full lieutenant in the Navy. My daughter, she lives in Plano, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas, and she is the district manager of one of the divisions at Baylor Hospital in Dallas.
Oh, okay.
And her twin brother, Tim, lives in Stowe, Vermont, and he manages a golf and ski resort in Stowe.
Okay. Okay, good. Where did you grow up?
Willisville.
Willisville. You did tell me that.
Yeah.
What schools did you attend?
I attended Willisville grade school. Well, I went to Cutler grade school 2 years. Then I attended Willisville grade school through the 8th grade. Graduated from Tricle High School in 1966. And I did, after I got out of the service, I went to what was BAC at that time for 2 years on the GI Bill.
Okay. Did you like school?
Recess.
At least you're honest.
No, I did. It was good.
Okay. What did you enjoy doing in your youth?
Hunting and fishing. I was always out doing something. In high school, I shouldn't tell this, but I had my own private holiday that I took every year. January 31st was the last day of rabbit season, and I took off and went rabbit hunting.
Okay. What were you doing before you joined the service?
After high school, I worked at Gilster Mary Lee, well, it was Gilster Martha White at that time in Steelville on the loading dock for about 2.5 years before I was drafted.
Okay.
And I went back there for about 8 months after I got out before I went to school.
Okay. And what year did you join the service?
December 10th, 1968,
How long did you serve?
till November 29th of 1970.
Okay. Where were you living when you joined the service?
Willisville.
Willisville, okay. How old were you when you were drafted?
20.
20, okay. In which branch of the military did you serve?
Army?
The Army, okay. And you did say you were drafted?
Yes,
okay.
ma'am.
So you, I guess you really didn't have a choice of what branch if they drafted you. They drafted you right straight for the Army?
They drafted me right straight for the Army, and I had something happen that I didn't know could happen, but before I got drafted, the Marine recruiter kept, well, I worked part-time at a service station and kind of hung around there in Willisville, and the Marine recruiter kept coming through, and he tried to get me to join the Marines, and I wouldn't do it. And when he said, well, I can make sure you end up in the Marine Corps. And when I got my draft notice, written in pencil on top of it was Marine acceptable. And when I got to St. Louis to the induction center, the guy looked at me that was checking us in and said, oh, we got us another Marine. And I said, oh no. And he said, yeah, we filled our quota an hour ago. That was how close I come to being drafted in the Marine Corps.
So were you wanting to go into the Marines or?
No.
No, you wanted to be in the Army.
Right.
Okay, oh wow. Well, that worked out for your advantage then.
Yeah, I tell people that and they say, I never heard of that, but it sure was written on that draft notice.
Wow. That's good. At least you got to go where you want to go.
Yeah, right.
Before joining, had you ever thought about serving in the military before they drafted you? Had you ever thought about being in there?
Yes, I had, and the reason I didn't go ahead and enlist was that I didn't want to spend any more time in the service than I had to. That's why I waited for the 2-year drafting.
Okay. What happened when you departed for training?
My dad, I went to St. Louis to the induction center by train from Pinckneyville, and got up there, and I've just kind of told you what happened as I was going through the induction. Then the next day kept us overnight in a building there. The next day we were transferred to I went to Fort Leonard Wood from there.
Okay.
And was in a kind of a holding barracks until the platoon and company was formed. Then we went to our training.
Okay.
Something that might be of interest, my father served in the South Pacific in World War II, and 20 years after I got out of the service, it was at least 20 years, Dad had taken me to the railroad station, and like I said, 20 years later, he told me, he said, Wayne, he said, putting you on the train to go into service was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Because he knew what could happen, you know, and every time I think about what he said, I almost tear up to this day.
Yeah. Because he put you on there, but he didn't show any emotion at the time he did. He told you 20 years later.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's something to remember, though.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. What happened during your early days of training?
Well, the fifth week of training, I got sick with the measles and was quarantined in the hospital for a week.
Oh my God. So that was...
Yeah, it was, there was a whole floor, there was kind of a measles epidemic of the, what they used to call the German measles, or, and is it rubella, I think. And there was a whole floor that was quarantined.
Wow.
It was...
Oh my gosh. So after you got over the measles, what happened in training after that?
Well, I got out of the hospital of a morning. I went back to my unit, and the sergeant told me, he said, we're going to the infiltration course tonight. He said, if you don't feel like going, you can just stay here and we'll recycle you to another unit. Or if you want to go, we'll keep you where you're at and you'll just have missed that 1 week of training. So I got out of the hospital of a morning, And that night I was crawling through mud underneath a machine gun fire.
Oh my God. Oh.
But I did it.
Do you recall your instructors?
I recall one drill sergeant by name, Drill Sergeant Glover. He was hard, but he was fair. And then there was another drill sergeant that I greatly admired. And I do not remember his name, but I'll never forget his face and how sincere he was.
Okay.
You know, he really cared about his squad or his people. He and Sergeant Glover both were very good. I just cannot remember the other gentleman's name.
Yeah, that's okay.
That's 50 years ago.
Yeah. What did you think of basic training?
I thought it was like everything else in the military. It's you do what they tell you to do and everything's fine. If you kind of fight it, you're in trouble. So you just, you know, kind of roll with the punches and that. And I think it's an experience that a lot of people today should have, you know, for the discipline, because you do definitely learn discipline.
That's good. How did you adapt to the physical regimen of military life?
Very well.
Did you?
Yeah, I had no problem at all.
Okay.
A little soreness at first.
Yeah. What did you think about living in the barracks?
It was okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Had some very, very good friends in basic, and then later I was in Colorado and then in Germany, and it was okay.
Okay. That's good. How was the food?
In basic, I couldn't get enough of it. I went into basic weighing 162 pounds and come out weighing 175 and starved to death while I was in there.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, and then most of the food was good. Some, you know, it's like everything else. At times there's stuff you don't like, and those days I ate bread and butter.
Okay. Did you get any free time during boot camp?
I did. I got a couple of weekend passes and rode the bus home
Okay.
for, I think it was twice. And the one weekend I rode the bus home was the weekend I got back with the measles.
Oh no. Oh. Hope you didn't give it to anybody at home.
I'm sure I did, but I didn't know I had it, you know.
Right. What was the worst part of boot camp?
Gee, it's been so long ago. I think one of the worst parts of boot camp was that you were just physically tired all the time. And I was there in the winter, and it was very, very cold and uncomfortable. And then we'd go into a classroom, and it'd be nice and warm. And the worst part was staying awake.
Okay, did you receive any specialized training? And if so, what kind was it?
Well, I was sent directly from basic to Fort Carson, Colorado, to an engineering company because I had run equipment before I went in, and they just directly assigned me. I didn't go through AIT. And while I was at Fort Carson, I went through a 3-week mountain and recon training course called Recondo, and that was a rough course. We every morning before breakfast we ran 5 miles, and it did 14 repetition of the daily dozen, which there was a dozen exercises, and we did 14 repetition of those plus running 5 miles. And this is at 6,000 foot altitude. And when I got out of that, done with there, I was in probably as good a shape as most Olympic athletes. And I'm not bragging.
Yeah.
Like, that's 50 years ago.
Yeah, well, that's okay, that's okay. You may have answered this question when I asked you, where did you serve? So,
I served basic at Leonard Wood,
okay.
and I spent about 11 months at Fort Carson, Colorado, in C Company of the 52nd Engineer Battalion. And I was sent to Germany, and I spent 10 months there before I got out, and I was in the 54th Engineer Battalion.
Oh, wow. How did you travel between your locations of service?
Basic training, after basic to Fort Carson, it was in the dead of winter and there was a lot of snow, and I rode a bus to Colorado.
Mm,
But the rest of the time I traveled was by plane.
okay. What were some of your memories of serving abroad?
The beauty of the country in Germany, it was just fantastic. And another thing I remember about where I was stationed at, a place called Wildflicken, it had been a World War II training facility for the German panzers, and there was still a lot of the old German bunkers and stuff around post. And right not far from our barracks was a burnt out German Panzer tank still sitting there.
Oh, wow.
That, and like I said, most of the people were really nice. Couldn't understand them, but
They were nice, okay.
yeah.
What was the most impressive place that you saw?
Most impressive place that I saw. I think probably I got to go on an R&R, and I went and spent like 4 days down in a place called Garmisch, Germany. And Garmisch is the site of I think it was the 52 Winter Olympics. Mm-hmm. And we were actually, the military took over the village for the Olympics, and that's where we stayed. Like, it cost me $1 a day for a room.
Oh, wow.
But Garmisch, if you go up over the mountain, which is Zugspitze, on the other side is Innsbruck, Austria. And the Olympics have been held there several times, and that area was just super beautiful.
It's amazing. You got a good thing that you were able to see that.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. What kind of friendships did you form while serving, and with whom?
Oh, well, my roommate in Germany was a gentleman from Texas, and his name was Lindy Britton. And we got really close at that time, and he left and went to Vietnam, and I hadn't heard from him since. Mm-hmm. And a year ago in August, my oldest son set up, and I went on an honor tour to DC, mm-hmm. and we were looking at the name roll for the Vietnam Wall, and the sergeant come up there and he asked me, he says, "Is there anybody on there you'd like me to help you find?" And I said, "No, there's several people that I'd like to help me not find." Yeah.
Right.
And Lindy's name wasn't there. I hadn't heard from him, but he and I got real close. And then there was, in Colorado, there was a Bob Seals and Bob Taylor and Billy Trotter. They were all, we had double bunks in the corner, and we were, I guess all four of us were more or less, in double bunk beside each other, and we got to be really close.
Okay.
And Billy drank my aftershave lotion.
Oh. Did he intentionally drink it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. How did you stay in touch with family and friends back home?
I wrote
Okay.
quite often. And
did they respond back to you also?
yes, they did.
That's
all
good.
the time. And my wife, of soon to be 50 years, we wrote every day.
Okay.
And for 10 months. And yeah, good communication.
That's good, that's good. What did you do for recreation or when you were off duty?
Went to town, spent some time at the EM Club, have a beer once in a while, and a lot of times I would just get a book and a soda and sit and read on my days off. And I spent a lot of time shining shoes.
That was a good little occupation for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, we would sit around of an evening, 3 or 4 guys, and talk, and I'd usually be polishing shoes or something while we were talking, and you know.
Okay, my son did that same thing. He shined shoes in the military.
Yeah, I'm sure he did.
Did you ever attend a USO show?
No, I did not.
Did you have contact with civilians while you were there?
Yes.
How did they treat you?
Very good. As a matter of fact, this is hard to believe, but when I was in Colorado, there was a family there. The wife was from Willisville, and her parents were neighbors to me when I grew up, and her husband was from Steelville, and he worked at NARAD there at the mountain, and they would come on post and pick me up and take me to their house for dinner and stuff.
That's good. Did you ever meet or see anyone famous?
I don't think so.
Did you ever meet any POWs?
No, but I did when I was at Colorado. We had a rock crusher, and I run a dozer at the crusher, and they set up a like a miniature stockade out by the rock crusher, and they had the inmates from the stockade. Most of them were not draft dodgers, but AWOLs. Mm-hmm. And I would go in there with my dozer and rip it up, and they'd pick up rocks. Mm-hmm. And I went in there one day, and one of them wanted a cigarette, you know, and I asked the guard, I said, can I give him cigarettes? And I ended up giving away all of my cigarettes.
What did you think of the people you served with?
Most of the people I served with were really, really fine people. Mm-hmm. I had no problems with them at all.
Good, good. What were your commanding officers like?
Most of them were very good. I had no problem with them at all.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. What was the highest rank you ever achieved?
A specialist 4th class.
Okay. Special forces. Did you say you were in the special forces?
I was in. I went through a kind of a condensed special forces training called Recondo School.
Okay. What kind of missions did you do?
Mostly field problems. In Germany, we did a lot of field work, because where we were at was only 5 kilometers off the Iron Curtain. And we were out in the field a lot. And one other thing that might be of interest, this, I guess 50 years is long enough I can talk about it, but on post there was what they called a NATO site. And it was like a 30-foot high fenced enclosure with double wire, walkways in it, 4 guard tires, a gate guard, and it had a big bunker in the middle of it. And you had to have a top secret clearance to pull guard on that. And the rumors were that that was a nuclear storehouse. And there was a group of Air Force detachment with Nike missiles there. And if something started, our battalion had the job of blowing the Autobahn. There was 4 companies of engineers, 1 battalion of infantry, and the Nike for the Air Force. We were given, the infantry was supposed to hold for 20 minutes to give us time to blow the bridges and for the Air Force to get their missiles off. That's how expendable we were at that post.
Wow.
Like I said, that's 50 years ago, so I don't think I'm giving away any
No,
secrets.
you're not. As a member of those special forces, did you ever see combat?
No.
Okay. Was there a chance that you could see combat?
Well, there was always a chance of being sent to Vietnam, you know, but I wasn't. One thing that did happen about a month before I got out was when the first attack went on in Lebanon. And we stood on full alert for like 48 hours by our vehicles and that, waiting to possibly go to Lebanon when that uprising took place. That's probably as close to combat as I ever came.
How did you feel about avoiding combat?
I didn't want to, but I always felt I left my friends and my even high school friends that served, kind of let them down that I didn't, you know, but, you know, it's kind of hard to explain.
You didn't have a choice though, did you? I mean,
well, I could have volunteered for Vietnam anytime I wanted to.
Okay.
But you don't volunteer for something that
I understand.
yeah, I you know, and I've always felt guilty about not doing that. But yeah, I lost several friends over there and a cousin, and it was rough.
Yeah. Did you personally know anyone who did see combat? You just said your cousin and your...
Yes, I had my high school buddy, Jim Bogenpole, Jim David, my cousin, Delbert Brockmeyer, who was killed. I could keep going. I mean, there's just...
So there were quite a few there.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell me what your duties were while you were in the military?
Well, like every other enlisted man, I pulled a lot of guard duty in KP, but my primary duty was D7 dozer operator. And I run a dozer at the quarry, and then when I got to Germany, that was a combat engineer, not in the heavy equipment, and I ended up most of the time driving a truck.
Okay. Did you ever have a chance, no, did you ever have to change jobs or do a job that you weren't trained for?
Yes. I got training there, but being a combat engineer, I had never worked on putting together float bridges or Bailey bridges, which were metal frame, almost like an erector set. And being an equipment engineer, I had never had training on that, but I did learn that while I was in Germany with the combat engineers.
Okay.
We actually float bridged the Rhine River.
Mm. Wow. What part of your job did you least enjoy?
I guess it'd have to be guard duty.
What was your most memorable experience while serving?
Oh boy. I don't know if I've got time to talk about this or not, but we were on bivouac in a field problem in Colorado, and I was sitting like in a dugout or a foxhole, and there was 2 of us, and the other guy was napping, and I was on alert, and I was sitting there and I felt something crawl up my leg, and I was sitting there kind of squatted down, come up my leg, and I'm sitting there, and a rocket or flare went off down range and lit up, and I had a pack rat sitting on my knee. And I knocked him off. I was scared to death it was a rattlesnake, but when I saw what it was, I knocked him flying, and I hit the other guy, said, "It's your turn to pull guard." Funny things like that happen.
Right.
That's what I like to remember.
That was gonna be my next question, one of your funny memories, but that is one of them. Huh?
Yes.
Where were you when your period of service was up?
I was still in Germany.
Still in Germany.
Yeah.
How did you return home?
By plane to Fort Dix, New Jersey, where I was mustered out, and then I flew from there to St. Louis.
Okay. How were you received by your family and community?
Family and community was great. I had no problem, and everybody, like almost everybody I knew was a veteran, my age, because that's just the way it was, you know.
How did you readjust to civilian life?
Very well, I think. I went back to work, got married I got out last in November, and Myrna and I got married in April, and I was working at the cake mix plant again, and then went to school, and after that worked at the mine for a while, and ended up spending almost 30 years at the Postal Service.
Oh, wow, okay. What was your first job after discharge? I think you just told me that.
I went back to the cake mix plant
okay.
where I'd worked before.
What was the biggest surprise about the civilian workplace?
How lazy some of the people could be that I was working with, because I was used to everybody,
Working.
Right.
Okay. Are you a member of any veterans organizations?
I've been a member of the American Legion in Steelville for 50 years.
Okay. What have you done since separating from the military?
Well, I worked in the coal mine, then as a postal carrier, and I've done, something went right through my mind. I guess basically just lived. My wife and I raised a family of 3 children we're very proud of that I talked about earlier.
Right.
And I'd say that's the main accomplishment of my life is that.
That's good. How has your military service impacted your feelings about war and the military in general?
I think the military is a necessary, I don't want to say evil, but it's a necessary thing to keep us safe. We've had a lot of very brave men who give everything to keep us where we are, and I would go, of course they wouldn't want a 70-year-old, but I would go back in to protect our country again.
Okay.
And I can trace my ancestry back to the colonial days at Jamestown.
Wow.
And I know for sure I had a great-grandfather who was in the Union Army in the Civil War and was killed at Atlanta. And I had a great-grandfather who was in the Civil War Union Army, one on each side of the family.
Wow.
And then my grandfather served in France in World War I. My dad served in World War II. And I had 5 uncles that served in World War II, and I think I had 4 or 5 cousins who served in the Vietnam era.
Really big military families.
Yeah.
Yes. Wayne, is there anything else that you would like to tell us that we haven't discussed, that you want to add to the interview?
The only thing I would add would be the fact that I think in the condition our country is in today, that it would be great if everyone got a chance to learn the discipline that the military teaches. I think that would be a big asset to our country.
Okay. I agree with that too. And I'd like to thank you for all your service that you did, and thank you for doing this interview. And this concludes our interview
Okay.
for today.
Did I
Really
talk
good.
too much?
No, you didn't.
Okay. I